Welcome to Confident Co-Parenting, building a better life for you and your kids. I'm your host, Jeanne Ward. This show goes beyond co-parenting. It's about self-discovery and personal growth. Separation and divorce can shake your sense of identity, but my goal is to help you feel at ease in your own skin, both as a parent and in your new life. Through engaging conversations, I'll share tips, tools, and mindset shifts to help you build confidence, communicate effectively, and strengthen your self-identity. Let's dive in and see your situation in a new light, because when you thrive, so do your kids. A better future starts now. Hi, I'm Jeanne Ward, and you're listening to Confident Co-Parenting on Transformation Talk Radio. The road to confident co-parenting is one of growth, self-awareness, and relationship building. And today we are going to be talking a lot about all three of those things. When my ex, Matt, and I broke up, when the separation started, we were in a pretty bad place. We were barely talking. We weren't doing anything together. We definitely weren't doing things as a family. And we'd gotten to the point where the trust and teamwork had completely broken down. We had made some agreements in regards to our finances, and I'll just say that there was a breach in those agreements, and it led to the end of the marriage. But over the years, we have both done a lot of work on ourselves. And after we had started those journeys, we were able to really work on the relationship and get to where we are today, which is in a really great place. We are very excited to share about that with you all today. And so I'm super excited to say that my guest today is Matthew Ward, my ex-husband. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate you having me on the show. It's a good introduction. I'm very thankful to have the relationship that we do, and I really appreciate your role in that. If you'd have told me 5 years ago that we'd be on a podcast together, I probably would have left. But here we are, so we're doing okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a testament to the work that we've done on ourselves and on our co-parenting skills. So thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here and all the work you've done. And, the reason we wanted to do this is because it can be done. And, I love showing that off. We have many people who over the years have said to us that we're odd. The relationship that we have is weird. And I'm going to be honest, I'm quite proud of that because, like we said, we've both done a lot of work and have been able to get to where we are. And it has made our lives so much better and easier, right? It was, initially for our son, Ethan, who you'll hear a bit about today. We'll talk about our experiences, with him through this journey, but also, for each other. It's just made everything a lot smoother and easier and with a lot more peace. And, that doesn't always happen right at the beginning of a divorce. And so to be able to get to a place of peace is, to me, a huge accomplishment.
Agreed.
So, okay. So when we did start, like I said, we were in a bad place. And Matt, you had said to me once the divorce was finalized, stamp on the paperwork, and you had said, at this point, it's all about Ethan. That whatever you and I, whatever issues or details, logistics, we've sorted that out through the divorce process. And now we need to communicate in regards to our son. Is this in the best interest of our son? What made you say that?
Good question. Honestly, it wasn't coming from the best place. Even though I initiated the separation through my behavior, I was really hurting after moving out. I knew that I had messed up your life. I was sure I'd messed up my life. And I saw focusing on Ethan as a way to redeem myself, honestly. Like I could tell myself that I wasn't a complete failure. If I was the dad that Ethan needed me to be so that he could grow up to be an emotionally balanced and loving man. Looking back, I think there was a part of me that knew that I needed him as much as he needed me as his dad. I probably didn't recognize that at the time, but being able to focus on him and doing right by him, I think that saved me from going to even darker places in that post separation divorce depression.
Yeah. Interesting you use the word the darkness and the depression because that's so common. Um, I mean, a horrible place to be, but common when we're going through this. And I'm pointing it out more so for those listening. And if you're going through this, that you know that many of us do go through this and have these really, really hard experiences during the divorce, post divorce, even sometimes years after the divorce. And it's interesting, Matt, that you talk about the darkness and depression. For me, there was a lot of hurt
Hmm.
um, and feeling shunned and just kind of discarded. And for me, it showed up as anger. That was
Yeah.
safer for me, was just to be so angry. And I think that was the hardest experiences for me was that anger and how it came out at Ethan. Because little things would just set me off and then I'd yell. And so yeah, those beginning days, months, and years were super hard. And for me, it was anger. Can you talk? Do you want to talk any more about the hardest parts for you in the beginning?
Um, the hardest parts. Yeah, I think. Oh, let me think about this. Pretty quickly, we came to an agreement um, that we would have 50-50 custody,
Yeah.
right? Which I know now that it's very rare for a mother to agree to 50-50 custody so quickly. So I thank you for that because I don't know what I would have done, being if I was cut off from Ethan. Um, but you had him for a week, I had him for a week, and we'd exchange on a Sunday. So to come back to your question, the hardest part for me, it was returning to my apartment after dropping him off with you for the week because having a child around the house, there's always background noise. It could be the TV, we could be playing games. There's always something. There's life, right?
Yeah.
And walking back into that empty apartment, having dropped him with you, it was lifeless. It was just silent and still and lifeless. And I would just sit down on the couch and stay there for hours, like literally hours, just staring into space, sitting in the silence. Um, Obviously, I was pretty depressed and in a lot of pain. Um, and this was before I'd started, therapy and the work. Um, if I could do over, I think the one change I'd make there is I would reach out to my friends, right? I would share my emotional state with my closest friends,
Mm.
and I would ask them to make sure that I never had to be alone,
Mm.
on a Sunday afternoon, and just having that social contact, having the camaraderie, I think would have made a world of difference. But because of the state I was in, I didn't want to ask for help. For help,
Yeah.
I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I felt a lot of guilt about what I'd done to you and Ethan, and that prevented me from asking for help. It's like
Mm.
it would have been so easy to do, right? But sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when we're in those bad places. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think with my anger, I did a really good job of shutting out my friends because no one wanted to be around me. And so that's where, I also felt the loneliness. And I think it's so common for a lot of us to have a hard time reaching out for help and asking others to help and support us. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
would say to anybody who can relate to the things I've said, I know it's hard, but the sooner that you can start that journey in the work, the sooner you come out of it.
yeah,
It's it's hard to make the decision when you're in the worst of it, but it it's so true that the sooner you do it, the sooner you'll feel better.
Yeah. And you have to go through it, right? You can't go around it. You can't
That's right. That's right.
skip it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that you're sharing today that and we this came up as we were prepping for today too. Things that I've just heard for the very first time since our divorce, and we're 10 years out. So, it's still always a learning experience, but how hard it was for you and the feelings of the guilt and shame, because I had made up a lot of stories during the separation and divorce. And going back to my first question of, what brought you to say it's all about Ethan now? Because the story I had made up regarding that was it was about you being so done with me that you didn't even want to have
Mhm.
anything to do with me. And it helped me just continue to sit in that victimhood and tell myself that that I am worthless, that there just it continued to cut down my self-esteem and keep me in a bad place. So it's so interesting and helpful and enlightening to hear where you were and what you were going through, to be a little gentler on myself and
Yeah.
process it in a different way. And so, the stories that we tell ourselves can really get us into trouble. And I think, it's one thing that I think humans are great at, right? We fill in the gaps and makes because we're good at making sense of things, even if we have
Yeah.
to fill it in.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, a lot of times we fill it in with things that are our worst fears. And so, yeah, it's
Yeah.
really
It's
helpful to
really
hear.
interesting. I mean, I think, a lot of us have heard the phrase fake it till you make it,
Mhm.
right? And it's almost that, but in reverse, right? Like it made you so angry that that the person you became started pushing people away. And so that becomes a loop, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I can think of another example, and I hope you don't mind, Jeannie, but it's actually an example for you rather than me. But we've been separated for a long time, like maybe 5 or 6 years, and I think we'd been a family event, and I was dropping you off, and you said to me that you didn't think that I'd taken ownership for my role in the separation. What I heard from you was that you thought that I thought that it was your fault, and in my world, it was all me. And so that was so strange to hear you say that. Um, and when I readily said, oh, I think you thought I'd said it even without thinking about it, but I was like, no, what do you mean? It was me. Um, you just started crying.
Of course.
Yeah. No, I mean, just the relief, right? Like it was clear that
Yeah.
you'd been carrying that narrative in your head for a long time. And it was there just, causing pain like a thorn in you the whole time. And of course, had I realized, I'd have said it straight sooner, but I had no idea. So yeah,
Yeah.
to your point, I think it's really important for us to recognize we that there's truth in what we tell ourselves, but that truth is twisted around a narrative often. And so we need to fact check that narrative whenever possible, especially if we think it's having negative effects on us.
Yeah. And I remember that conversation. And I think that the other thing that I take away from it is, even if you think the other person knows or thinks a certain way, don't assume, right?
Yeah.
Because you thought I understood all of that and knew all of that, and I did not at all. And I remember even in the moment you saying, "Well, of course," and my reaction was, "No, not of course. I I didn't know that." Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was huge. I remember that being really huge for me. Knowing what was going on then and at the when we went through the divorce, as well as years later.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And it's funny, the the focus, where does the focus go, right? You had said it's all on Ethan, but so much came up about having to focus, each of us, on ourselves. And then eventually we got to focus on what we're saying now, focusing on each other and how to mend certain aspects that had gotten broken, that are helpful, that we mended them. Not
That's right.
everything needs to be mended, but
Yeah.
those things have really helped. So, shifting back to Ethan and us as parents, parenting him. One thing I wanted to talk to you about is our parenting styles
Hmm.
over the years. And one thing that I see when I'm working with co-parents a lot is that post-divorce, two main things will get in the way and cause a lot of friction. And one thing is values. If there are very different values amongst each parent, and it's not understood or discussed, that I don't think was an issue or is an issue for us. For us, it was the other thing that I see, which is parenting styles. That sometimes both,
Hmm.
each parent will have a different parenting style, and then they'll make a judgment that the other one's doing it wrong. And just for the audience's sake, I know Matt, we know this, but just wanted to let people know there are four main categories of parenting styles, and one is authoritarian, which is really strict. There's an authoritative, which some schools of thought say the authoritative is the best for the child, where it's warm, but there's also boundaries and rules, but there's the warmth and support to the kid. There's permissive, where it's warm, but no control. The kid kind of dictates how and what they do. And then the last is uninvolved, where there's just, no contact, not a lot of involvement, and no rules. So I think that got in the way for us. I feel like I was a bit of a mixture of that authoritative, where there was warmth and some boundaries, but definitely had my moments of permissive, where I'd let Ethan get away with things. And I remember once or twice you even said you're not his friend. And in my mind, I justified some of those behaviors because I thought, well, as long as the outcome is what I want, as long as where my boundary is set, he does that in the end, it's okay. And in looking back, there were times where I could have taken a more engaged approach with him. So that's kind of where my parenting style was. How would you describe yours? And did it change over the years?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it is really tricky, right? Because when you are operating as a family unit, as long as there's some overlap between the two parenting styles, they kind of work together to form a whole, and the child benefits from that whole.
Yeah.
But as separate parents, they become almost it's almost in conflict, right?
Yeah.
So you described your style as having some element of permissiveness,
Yeah.
and I really didn't have much of that at all. I was really authoritarian. I mean, as much as I would like to say I was authoritative, I'm a very much a rule based guy. So Ethan had a lot of rules with me, and where that generated conflict for us was when you were being permissive and I was being authoritarian. It led to a narrative in my head, at least, that you were being the good cop and I was being the bad cop.
Mm, yeah.
And during those times, because things wax and wane, right? Nothing's ever constant. But during those times, you know, it made me fearful that Ethan was going to choose you over me. In fact, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but approaching Ethan's 14th birthday, and at 14, that's the age in Georgia when Ethan could have chosen where he wanted to live and we would no longer have a say. In the run up to that, I was terrified, really, that I was going to lose him to you and that he would just say on his birthday, I want to live with mom, bye bye. Um, and that was really hard. It, I did a lot of reflection during that period, and I realized just how authoritarian I had been. It made me think a lot about it, and it actually made me realize what is one of my biggest regrets, and that is how post separation and divorce, I felt like my life was just spinning out of control. Like I couldn't control anything. Like it was just everything was just a mess. Um, but I could control a young boy. Right? He's very easily controllable, and so I did. And um, some kind of displacement, right, where I tried to make myself feel better by controlling him, which I feel terrible about now. And Ethan, I know you're going to be listening to this at some point, and I'm sorry, son. That was really bad. Um, but just coming back to the parental styles, it is really hard when you have a conflict like that to sit down and come to an agreement because you both feel that what you're doing is right. You both feel that it's right for the child, and there's no obvious solution. There's no obvious compromise. And it's also, a bit of whiplash for the child, right? Ethan being with me and I was being authoritarian for a week, and then he would come to
Yeah.
you and you would get permissive for a week. And, you know, I think, I think that hurt him a little bit, but it also gave him an opportunity to be a very sly child and take advantage of that, right? Sometimes he would use those disparities to really kind of work his magic to get, what
Yeah.
he wanted as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm trying to hold back the tears here. Um, but I also feel like I want to, oh man, I want to, like I want to give you the hug and be like, you and I were both doing the best we could, and that's what a parent does, right? A parent does need to parent their child, whether you want to call that control or teach or guide. I mean, that's a part
Yeah,
of parenting, right? We all do it a little differently, but yeah, and I think we both agree that we love who Ethan is becoming, who he is growing into,
absolutely.
the young man he's growing into. And so I think in the end, it's worked. He absolutely has both of us in him.
Yep, absolutely.
Um, good, bad, and ugly, and from both sides. But yeah, and I think that's the thing too is to for me to always try to pull myself back out of the weeds and say, you know, what's the outcome, right? A child does need, excuse me, discipline and rules.
Yep,
Um, and I never faulted you for that. I think what was hard for me was seeing sometimes the interaction between you two
yep.
and just how tense it would get at times. That was hard for me.
Yeah.
And it was reflective of us and where our relationship had gotten. So that got personal too. And I'll tell you, even a few years out, I had to be careful once I became aware of it. And I know and I'm not proud of this at all, but earlier on, there were moments where, you would be very tough on something. And then he and I would have an experience where it was easier and smoother. And I would feel a little, uppity about that of, oh, well, look at me, look what I can do. And that once I did more of, my own work in the therapy and everything, and I became aware of it, it was still even, I'd have moments of, Jeannie, check yourself.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to feel good about ourselves, right?
yeah.
Um, you know, but it's a fine line between something we've mentioned a couple of times on this call is just stopping and just telling yourself it's okay, right? And being easier on yourself and telling yourself you're doing the best you can. It's a fine line between that. And I'm like, huh, I'm a better parent. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a competition, right? I mean, and I think that's what happens so much is it begins to feel like a competition. And then even if one parent wins, the kid's losing.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, yeah. Yeah. And you just said something that's so important. And as you were talking earlier about, what would you have changed? Kind of not so much in parenting specifically, but more generally for me, one thing that I would have absolutely changed earlier on if I could have is being gentle on myself and like you said, making sure I know I am doing the best I can with what I've got right now. That took many, many years to do. And the example that had come up for me is, you know, as you know, Matt, I've always had time issues and being on time. And and there was a time when, I was single mom in it, I was working full time, I was trying to do all the things. And Ethan and I had some trip where we were taking a plane
Mm,
and we got there and, we had time, but not enough to get through Atlanta security. And we missed our plane. And, and I knew, and I had, all the voices in my head. I had your voice, I had my voice, I had my mom's voice, right, of how I messed up. And, and yeah, it was a mess. And so with things like that, and even now I can, I start out by saying there were different scenarios. I was working full time. I was doing this, that, and the other, right? And I was doing the best I could at the time.
yeah,
So times like that, I would have loved to have been gentler on myself.
yeah,
And that's definitely something I hope that everyone I work with takes away, is that ability to become gentler on themselves.
it's
So,
important.
yeah. Okay, so we're getting close to time, and I would love to end on something positive. I mean, this has been really impactful for me. It's hopefully it's been helpful for those listening. But I do want to kind of shift the mood a little bit and with something on a happier note. And so I wanted to have both of us talk about the a moment or what we found or find to be the best memory that we've had with Ethan that we would love to relive over and over, right? We often talk about, oh, what would I have done differently? But let's talk about one thing we loved, loved, and just would experience again if we could. So what's yours?
Um, so after separation, I moved into an apartment with a smallish living room and, with a couch and a table in the middle. And Ethan used to love playing Nerf guns. And we would have Nerf battles where we would just run around and around and around the furniture. And Ethan would be just laughing so hard, trying not to let me hit him, doing his best to shoot Nerfs at my butt. I mean, he was just like having the best time of his life. I mean, it was joyous, really, but such a simple thing.
Yeah,
Um, but his raw delight in those moments was just wonderful.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if I could do it again and again because it was pretty exhausting, but it was
I know, right?
just listening to that laughter, given everything else that was going on
Yeah.
around us, was really great.
And I think so many parents can talk about that joy and the love from their kids, right? And yeah, I love that you brought that up. For me, it was an experience going to Universal Studios, which was something that Ethan and I loved to
Yeah.
do. We went multiple times, and there was one time where, and he was probably 12, 13, and he just grabbed my hand and we were holding hands. And at first, it kind of felt a little odd because, of his age, but I just felt love and I felt
Mm.
gratitude from him. And it just, yeah, it was a special, special moment. So awesome. Well, on those notes, the love and the gratitude and the joy, we're going to have to wrap up. Matt, thank you so much for being
No,
here.
thank you, Jenny, for inviting me and for being the parent that you've been.
Thank you. And same to you. Yeah, that's why our kid is who he is.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. This is Confident Co-Parenting. You can find it at my website, confidentcoparenting.com. You can find this episode and others, as well as information about me, or you can go to YouTube, Transformation Talk Radio, for other episodes. And we're going to leave you with just another big thank you for listening. And I ask you to just always cherish yourself, your kids, and those relationships that matter most to you. Bye bye. You've been listening to Confident Co-Parenting. Join me, Jeannie Ward, every second Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio for more insights and practical strategies to support your co-parenting journey. Let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on social media, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with those who could benefit. And if you or someone you know needs support, coaching can make all the difference. Visit confidentcoparenting.com to learn more. See you next time.